minimum contacts. So they still have to establish a reason why they can touch you with the driver's license laws and everything, and most of what everybody's fighting. Because I still think most crime stems from the misapplication of driver's license laws, by the way. Yeah. Huh? Hello?
Yeah, they have to have minimal contact with you in order for them to be able to have you on any jurisdiction.
Correct.
Which they don't.
Correct. And what it is in the states is the definition of the word state. It's called in the driver. Every state has a driver's license compact, and every driver's license compact defines the word state basically the same way. It's a state, a territory, a possession, district of the United States, District of Columbia, or the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico. Well, if you use a concept called Eden's Egertism, I can't even say the damn word, but it's a concept where all the like words. All the like words in a phrase will mean exactly the same thing. So when you see state, it doesn't mean a state of the union. It means a territory possession of the United States. Yes. Go ahead.
My internet's being stupid.
All right. Well, anyway. Let me get.
When I get 5G ultra wide, it freaking gets stupid.
Yeah. Well, let me get to it. Okay. So I had a veterinarian down here.
Go ahead.
All right. He was facing 30 counts of unlawful practice of veterinary medicine because he went through an administrative procedure where they just screwed him over. Right. I mean, totally just fucked him over because they were trying to get him because his billing practices. He's a nice guy. He's good. He's a good guy. What he did was he has a veterinarian where he does, anybody who comes in with a stray animal, he'll go ahead and just spay and neuter them for whatever they got in their pocket, or $30 or something like that. So if they only have $5, it's $5. If they have no dollars, it's like if they only have a penny, it's a penny. Okay, he did it as a public service basically. So what the administrative agency did here in Florida is they I think it was one of their relatives or someone from Tennessee came down. And he went and spayed and neutered their dogs. And the woman complained about blood being in the urine. Well, Jesus, you just cut the dog open and removed his shit or her stuff, her reproductive organs that are tied to her waste disposal. Of course, you're going to have blood show up in the urine. It's only natural. If you did it to a man or a woman, you have the same thing. So they went and made a big deal about it. Sent in their team to come harass him. He got a lawyer, and the lawyer ended up taking all his books and records, quitting on him, and then giving all the books and records to the Department of Licensing. Well, they came in and suspended his license and fined him like $20,000. So he said and told him to stop practicing. He's like, "Fuck that, we're going to practice." So the sheriff over in the county comes over and arrests him for every single procedure he did, which turned out to be like 30 or 40 procedures by the time they stopped. So they're going through their thing and they're presenting everything. They're going through all the stuff all y'all go through. The trademark shit, the agency, the everything. You name it, they've done it. So they're getting up to a point where they put something in, and the government put something called a traverse, which is a rebuttal for everything they've done, saying it didn't happen. So they handed it over to me, and I came up with one just by going through the statutes. In order to establish minimum contacts on a veterinarian, the intent of the state of Florida, the legislature, was that they have the first show where he's A, incompetent, he doesn't know what he's doing, and B, that he's a threat to the community, threat to the public. Well, in their administrative determinations, they admitted in there that he was neither a threat nor incompetent. He's been doing this for 40 years. There's no way he's incompetent. And his business is just like, damn, I don't think, he's not the only one in town, but dude, they're out the door, and he had to buy the lot next door just for parking. And so I went in there and I go, all right, so this is what y'all are doing. Y'all are trying to get this guy on this, but what you haven't done is shown where you have minimum contacts, and the minimum contacts is defined by the legislature is he has to show he's incompetent and he's a threat to the public, which nobody ever admitted, nobody ever alleged. So therefore, y'all haven't fulfilled the minimum contacts, which means you're doing a whole host of crimes, and the prosecutor knows that this shouter shouldn't be in court. So the next time he goes into court, which is about a week later, they dismiss, they do a novo prosse on him, and the judge, and both judge and the prosecutor shake his hand and tell him he really knows his rights. And it's all about minimum contact. So the minimum contact the state has to have with any of these officers on the road is that you must be driving in, you must be what they call driving on a territory or possession of the United States within that state, and that doesn't include the roads. The roads belong to everybody. God made the roads for everybody, just like he made the earth for everybody, and intended it for the advantage of the rich and the poor. And upon those roads, he put no taxes. That's in the Law of Nations, Book 2, Article 133. So these guys coming out of their woodwork to do this, when they're coming out and they're in that territory, and they're coming out of their territory, like when they leave the police station and go on the road, they're no longer in the state of Florida. They're on the land of Florida now. Big difference between state of Florida and Florida that was created in 1838 by the Constitution of the People. So when the cops are out there, they're actually going out into foreign territory to go kidnap someone, to bring them back into their jurisdiction, to convert them into a person, to human traffic them, treat them like an infant, and do whatever they're doing, right? And we got this from it. We've been doing the guy I've been hooked up with, Lex, he has a buddy who was in jail, and a Polish guy was in there, and they arrested a Polish guy when he was running from the cops on a campus or something, I don't know what it was, but they arrested him in the stairwell of a parking garage. Okay, on the stairwell was owned, I think, by the publicly owned or whatever, but a bank was using one level. The level above them had rented that out for their parking for their customers and their staff. Well, the university was using the lower level. And he asked them all, who has interest in the middle? And nobody answered anything. So the guy wrote to the judge and said, hey, your people went out to international waters and go kidnap this guy and brought him in to traffic him under these charges. And the judge, like about a week later or something like that, got a hold of it and instantly kicked that guy out of jail because he agreed with him. Nobody had jurisdiction. So it's all about jurisdiction, and their jurisdiction ends where their property interest ends. Now, it's Article 1, Section 817, and all courts, every single court in America is an Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 court administrating the property interest of Congress and the legislature. You have no courts that have taken the Article 6 oath. Your executive office has never taken the Article 6 oath. Thus, the Constitution, as we've been told in 1787, never took full force and effect.
Now, Boris.
Yes.
I found some court cases you'll be interested in the other day. It said, the phrase I saw was, without territorial jurisdiction, there is no subject matter jurisdiction.
Exactly. So we got a case going on now with one of my buddies, my good buddies here. He's the subject of the Law of Boris 8-part series. He had the mortgage that disappeared. So he's operating in his truck. His truck is registered to his ministry trust. That's located on postal property with a P.O. box, right? It's all registered and everything is all set up. So they pull up his truck. They can't pull up anything on the computer screen because it doesn't show up anything. There's no information. So they still pull him over and they pull him out of the truck, and they went through his truck to find a name on something, and that's what they used to identify him. So in that moment, what they really did was the officer was acting in a commercial capacity without license, registration, and insurance to use the cruiser in commerce, thinking he is in territorial jurisdiction, applying his jurisdiction when he arrested him. But what they really did is went out to international territory, because all these states are countries. Every state of the Union, the perpetual Union, is a nation unto itself, of which they all joined into the perpetual Union for protection, a compact of protection with each other. Not with a higher sovereign, not with anybody else, but amongst themselves. It's called a confederacy, where all the states remained sovereign. All those states had the right to defend themselves, and they understood that not everybody in the states are part of government. Some of them are just peaceful inhabitants living their lives on this land. They have their own form of government, not this one. This one is only designed to protect the Union and protect the states from invasion, not to legislate the morals, values, and everything else of the people. That's not what that's not what this Union was for. The United States one that can do that because that's their employees and shit. They can tell them what to do. But so we got this guy here, and so we did a private. We contacted the prosecutor and the police privately. Nobody answered. We said, if you don't answer, it's proof you don't have territorial jurisdiction. And they didn't answer again. So we said, fine, this is our private agreement that everybody's got no territorial jurisdiction. They saddled a public defender on them. We tried to use the public defender to bring the agreement in. The public defender refused. So now we have to put in our answer. And our answer is going to be just about exactly what I did with the guy with the vet. I'm going to write it up exactly the same way. The only difference is I have to change what constitutes minimum contacts between when you're using a driver's license, because a driver's license is a compact. It's called driver's license compact, but it's only applicable in a state. And a state is defined in that compact as a state, territory, or possession of the United States, a territory of Puerto Rico, the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, or the DC. Right? So that means, and you got, and Rose versus Howlett, 1990, which was an old Florida appellate case that went to the Supreme Court, affirms that all state courts must enforce federal law according to their normal modes of procedure. They can't ignore it, and they can't say no because they don't like it. They have to come up with a valid excuse of neutral judicial administration allows it to happen. Then nobody's ever declared this. So and then criminal rules of civil procedure, Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure 1B9 defines what state is in all criminal actions that come before a federal court, and it defines it almost exactly the same way as the driver's license one, but it omits the word state. So it's just territory, possession of the United States and the Commonwealth of Puerto Rico and District of Columbia. So when you apply the rule of judium generis, I think I butcher that word every time I say it. But basically, since all like words and a definition are going to be the same, and you apply Rose versus Howlett, the supremacy clause, you apply judium generis to the state to what state defined in the federal drivers and in the U.S. and the Florida driver's license. You find that it's only the territory that Florida ceded to the United States, or that the United States owned before Florida became a state. Well, that wouldn't be anything except what St. Augustine would be the only thing that would be owned, because that was a military base that was also ceded when the King of Spain released his claims to the United States for all the public properties, but not the private property people already held.
Now, Eric does a good job of explaining this out of Colorado. He'll go along the lines of how many post offices are in Colorado, and somebody said one time, I'd say around 1,000. He said, you're close. He said, now go to Title III of the Colorado Revised Statutes. He said, because in Title III, there's only 3 post offices that were ceded jurisdiction. Everything else is a corporation called a postal service.
Yeah. There's not many. There's not many at all.
How would you prove whether or not your quote-unquote state court had jurisdiction ceded to it?
All right, here's the thing is, y'all forget, I don't have to prove shit. The burden of proof is always on the claimant. So the moment they make a claim against you, all I have to do is show them the definition of state and go, now, where was I operating in a state? And if I wasn't operating in a state, then everything that comes after that point, even if you're in a courthouse that ceded its jurisdiction, that courthouse still never got subject matter jurisdiction over you, never got personal jurisdiction, because just because everybody thinks the jurisdiction is one way doesn't make it so.
Yes.
Jurisdiction is established by general law, not by the will and consent and comity of the parties.
Right.
So if they're going to operate out of the law, the Florida already calls that. If you're going to operate outside of a general statute and you're going to claim you have the right to do that, that's called simulation of legal process. It's in the obstruction of justice section of Florida statutes. And the intention of the legislature is that it apply to anybody who thinks they're going to do that.
Yeah, you're not allowed to be lawless.
Yeah, you're not allowed to simulate legal process just to establish claims. You know, that's what they get all these quote sovereign citizens on, right? All these people going into these courts. You're trying to simulate legal process and shit like that.
Well, the reason why I asked the question is, say, for example, you had a traffic ticket or a misdemeanor from your past and you want to get the record clear because now you're starting to learn all the crap they've done and you want to go back and fix the record.
Subject matter jurisdiction can be challenged at any point in the proceedings or any time. And since that record is still open and being used against you, that proceeding is still going on.
So, yeah, but if you reopen the case under the guise of subject matter jurisdiction, would you have to prove that they didn't have territorial jurisdiction? That means they didn't have subject matter?
Right, and that's why I do things in a certain way. I go look at the law that they're following, show them what they're bound to. So, like in these statutes, okay, you got me on a driver's license charge. Awesome. Motor vehicle. Awesome. Fucking awesome. You're right. I did whatever you say I did, but the spot you pulled me over on, the actual dirt, is not in your jurisdiction. Therefore, none of those crimes happened in your purview. And all I have to do is show the legislation that shows the definition of state. Take Rose versus Hallett to show that all U.S. state courts have to abide by federal law because of the supremacy clause, and then take Ischerdum Genus. And let me read up what it actually says in that concept. It's out of Bouvier's. You know, it's not like I'm making the word up.
I
know you're not, Boris.
Bouvier's, Ischerdum Generis provides that where a general word or phrase follows a list of specific terms, the general word will be interpreted to include only the items of similar nature to the term specified. So if your definition of state and their laws, what they have to follow, is a state, territory, or possession of the United States or District of Columbia or Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, then it can't be Florida. Because Florida is an independent nation created by the people within the perpetual union. A state, territory, or possession of the United States, District of Columbia, Commonwealth of Puerto Rico, all possessions and territories and ownership of the legislature of Congress, not by the people. So therefore, state can't be Florida. State can only be a territory or possession of the United States, which would be a military base and other shit that was ceded to the United States or that the United States rents and have jurisdiction over their buildings.
And this is why they, on all of their documents, it has the all caps name, state of whatever state.
Yeah, that is just a franchise. But when you look at that name, you have to also look at it at the law which spawned it. So it's not you got to look at the application of law that spawned it. So Social Security created it, all that other wonderful stuff, right? So everybody thinks it's evil. You don't want the name, right? You don't want to be associated with it. You don't want to use it, but you're not going back far enough. In order for that state, in order for that birth certificate name to be constitutional and be in with the law, it must serve the purpose of what? The Declaration. It must be a form of that government that's used in which you will be protected while exercising your rights. You just haven't set it up right. You haven't fulfilled on the last line of the Declaration. You haven't expressed it. So they're going to sit there and administrate that trust or that thing, whatever you all want to call it, by its default terms. And if you go into any computers, everything's set up default-wise until you what? Go in and rearrange it to set it up the way you want it to be administrated by you.
And this is
So
and
you
now
have to
that
do the
right
same thing
there-
with that name because they can't do it at birth. That's called involuntary servitude. They can't make up those terms for you, but it's going to remain an infant at all times because it's a national security protection to prevent others from interloping with it. Because he who intermeddles with the estate of an infant will be held accountable, but it serves as your shield. So on the back end, since you're one of the contributors to its existence by virtue of your existence, you have a right. You have what is called naturally an inherent reversionary interest in that property that was created by the law because you have a tie to it. It was created as a result of your existence. So you shed that reversion by saying, all right, the usufruct of this thing is the treasures I would make will go to the state so they can have stuff in their coffer, the storehouse. That's what you're supposed to give everything to the storehouse. The reversion is, well, since I'm the one actually doing the work, the glory from that work can come back to me and not go to the Lord, which is intended. So you shed the reversion back to them. And under the IRS code, if you don't shed the reversion, no matter how remote, improbable, or how unfathomable it is, it still exists until you shed it. It's the one thing you have to do.
And this is why I agree with something. I think Boris said it. When it talks about in the Constitution, you have the right to alter or abolish government. Everybody takes it to
That's declaration. And then you have a right to be secure in your person. Yeah. So you have a right to make that person secure the way you want it to be operating when it interacts with the public. So in this administrative little nature they got going on, it'll be administrated according to the will of the government, which is God's will. And your will matches God's will. Your will matches the government's will. Now everybody's wills match up because you were instructed to take over the earth, subdue the earth in His name for His glory. Later on, we got all caught up in taking that glory for ourselves with the garden and the apple and all that shit. So Malachi, before you go from Old Testament to New Testament, tells you what? Give what you took back and pledge the storehouse, and see if I do not put the blessings out the window. The blessings will pour forth. And then Christ's way was you sell everything, give it to the widows, the orphans, and the poor. So what I came up with and then we found a document that says, that basically the usufruct, this whole nation was designed to protect the usufruct, which is their legal word for dominion, for future generations, so that we don't eat it up in one generation and saddle burdens and debts on future generations, which is exactly what has happened. He warned us against this.
That's why the elite call us useless eaters.
Yeah, we're eaters of the usufruct.
Now, what I was getting at on the abolition and the government, change your alter or abolish your government, is I heard somebody saying, I think it was you, Boris, don't quote me on this if it wasn't, but what I heard somebody say one time was, we're thinking of it wrong. It's not that all the people can overthrow the government. You have the right to establish the rules to the contract when you start doing things right.
Yeah, go back and read your declaration. Right? When you read the declaration, you get down to that second paragraph, right? We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal. They are endowed by the Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And to secure these rights, governments are instituted amongst men. So the purpose of government is to secure those rights. And they gave you a form with the name that you can lay your foundation on such principles and organizing its powers of that name, that municipal corporation that you've been granted within this structure. That's what it is. It's a self-governing, independent municipal corporation of your own. So you can lay your foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as it may most seem likely to affect their safetiness and happiness. What I'm saying is nobody organized your organization in such form as to you might seem likely to affect your safetiness and happiness, but also to ensure that the nation survives. And that's why I tell everybody, look at the last line of the Declaration. Because in support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, We mutually pledge our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. Gee, that sounds like fulfillment of the law under Galatians, because what were you instructed to do? Fulfill the law. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Therefore, wouldn't you want to make a world for your neighbor that's the world you would want to see for yourself?
James 2:8 also.
And that, yeah, and it's a couple times in there actually.
That's where
But
James 2:8 is where I come up with the name of my group.
Yeah, and that's
Greek words for that.
Yeah, and that's what I contend is people haven't done yet. So everybody's out there doing the W-4 stuff and the 1099 stuff and everything else, but they've never gone back and said, "Hey, dude, we got to organize this organization. This organization was created at your birth, but it was never organized. Its powers were never organized in such form that will most likely affect your safety and happiness. So they're going to treat it as what? An undocumented alien, a foreign resulting trust that hasn't been expressed yet. Thus, under their little world, you're the one using it. You're the one operating it. You're it because you haven't exercised the one thing that can make you not be it, called the power of appointment. You haven't appointed the interests in your trust to be to make the trust work. A trust is not only for holding property, it's for the division of interests in that property. If you don't release the interest, all the interests remain with the trust. And since you're holding all the interest, you're the owner. This is the way their law works.
I'm actually of the opinion so far, based on my evidence and their admissions, that this is why you need to go to probate court, because it's still in probate. That's your foundation.
You could
go there and express everything.
Yeah, you could. You go into your probate, but you're not doing a name change. You're doing a reorganization of the organization. Because it's all in bankruptcy. Under bankruptcy, it's a bankrupt institution, and you need to reorganize its powers under that bankruptcy to come out of bankruptcy. And you do that. How do you do that? 31 USC 3170 or 3713 or 3173. Let me pull it up here. 31 USC. Jesus Christ. 3713.
While you're looking that up.
All right, it's priority. It's called priority of government claims. All right, and number B, get ready for this one. All right, a representative of a person or a state, such as you, up until this moment in time. Okay, you've been a representative of a person or a state in some way, some shape, some form, some way, somehow. You did it. You don't know how you did it. It's irrelevant at this point. Just accept the fact that I've been acting this way. All right. So a representative of a person or a state, except a trustee acting under Title 11, which is all these public agencies, right? They're all acting under Title 11. Paying any part of a debt of the person or estate before paying a claim of the government is liable to the extent of the payment for the unpaid claims of the government. What that means, Social Security Act was enacted, the government's paying for these live birth events, you're out there using the name, and you're fighting the government over what property it was expecting to receive from that investment, which is a state in expectancy, because it was expecting to receive something from you called usufruct. And I do that because when you go down to that level of interest, there's only three interests: usufruct, reversion, and naked owner. The usufruct is expressed to create the reversion that you can shed to avoid taxation when they go do their probate thing and administrate your estates. Once a usufruct with a reversion shed out to someone hits probate, the usufructory interest and the naked ownership interest automatically goes to the reversioner and cancels the debt. Automatically. It just happens. It's operation of law. Nobody has to do anything. It just kind of happens. And the reversioner holds all the interest of the grant and has the same interest and rights and duties as the grantor. Since you're the grantor of the usufruct while you're using that property, then the reversioner would be the Treasury, which would mean the United States would hold all the right of enforcement. So if someone decided they weren't going to operate the usufruct, they can they can go ahead and transfer all that to the United States, which is everything they would have made in the usufruct during its lifetime. All the profits, rents, all that stuff would go to the United States. Now they manage to usufruct until you cease to exist and a death certificate is issued. Now everything collapses down. Now they can't run their generation skips. They can't run. They're passing off debt to the next generation. Can't do any of that, right? But until that point, you're a representative of a person or a state paying a part of a debt person before paying the claim of the government. Therefore, you're liable to any claim, any public debt obligation under the 14th Amendment, because you're seen as a, quote, owner. Right now, in that same statute, if you go back up to Part A, Part 1, A1, it says a claim of the United States shall be paid first. It says 31 USC 3713. All right, so a claim of the United States will be paid first when a person indebted to the government is insolvent and the debtor without enough property to pay all debts makes a voluntary assignment of property. So once you can get in there and get that recognized that the usufructuary interest is being pulled out and given away, now you're expressing that trust. Not only does that property kick in, that put it back in, what makes a claim in the United States debt paid first, but it also kicks in with the Trading with the Enemy Act. Because the Trading with the Enemy Act says if you do if anybody's considered an enemy of the government or a debtor of the government, whatever they want to call it, makes a voluntary assignment of property or does some other interest transfer or something like that, that's called an automatic acquittance and discharge from any further obligation. So you automatically go to peace. Because now you're discharged from obligation. You can't be held liable in any court for anything done or omitted in good faith while in reliance upon it. Nobody can. Even the judge, the attorneys, everybody. It's called an indemnity policy for all parties. So when you're really looking at stuff, 50 USC 4305, 40 Stat 411, Trading with the Enemy Act stuff, that statute is actually a contract, and that it's a public offering by the U.S. government to say, hey, if you're a debtor to us, or you're in trouble with us, if you transfer an interest or do something, it's called acquittance and discharge from further obligation. That creates a future event, which creates a trust that you're entitled to, that you're entitlement holder with, as beneficiary. Carries with it an indemnity contract of insurance to insure all parties while they're doing this, that nobody will be held liable in any court for anything done or omitted in good faith, and is a treaty because it establishes a peace between two foreign people. You're foreign to the U.S. government. The U.S. government is foreign to the states. So it actually establishes a treaty. And now when somebody interrupts with it, they're actually denying the United States its property interests. So it flips everything around on them to make a national security apparatus to prevent the bullshit these attorneys are fucking doing in the court right now. It'll turn it around on them and turn them into the one now who is stuck with the bill, because they just made claims against vested United States interests of which they had a duty not to make a claim against. because now they're trying to falsify their bounty contracts to the U.S. government for payment of an insurrection or rebellion that they're causing.
Hey, two things. Boris, when are you going to write your book?
I don't know. I could just take everything that I've written to this point and just put them all in books and chapters and say, here's the book.
I was getting ready to say, hey, have you actually written this up in a document? Because this.
No, they're all written up in I have it all over the place.
I know.
I have it on I Am Some Dude in the art. And if you go to Law Boris, I link to the I Am Some Dude archives. Mm-hmm. And that's where I first started with all that. And there's like 40 or 50 documents in there I wrote. And two of them, I tell everybody this, I think it's hilarious, that one day I was sitting with my buddies and we were talking and we got across that IRS, code where it says, an infant is a decedent of or grantor of an estate who hasn't got a bankrupt, all that stuff, right? That IRS code, what is it, 92- whatever the hell it is. Mm-hmm. And we're sitting there, we're talking about it, and I went, holy fuck, the moment they identify you with a social security number, there is no infant decedent. You know that?
No, I didn't know that.
The moment they use that name to identify you, is there an abandoned infant decedent estate?
So you could conditionally accept their offer.
Yeah,
And
because
then
they just used that name that's considered, an abandonment, right? Birth is abandonment.
Yeah.
Well, it
Yes,
can't be
ma'am.
abandonment. It can't be abandonment if I'm using it. It can't be
Now,
an infant if I'm sitting right in front of you because I'm an age of majority under the law. Now,
now,
it also can't be considered lost at sea because you're looking at the dude that you just fucking named. And it can't be an infant decedent grantor of an estate because it has a social security number because you're asking if it's my number. So it's my name, my number. No infant decedent estate exists. No supposed abandonment of estate exists. No lost across the sea exists because I'm standing right in fucking front of you. You just called me by that name and attached that number. None of that shit can exist.
that's why I've told people this. I said, if they say that's your name, said, okay, I conditionally accept your offer. But since a name is property and has a property interest, then who's going to compensate me for the misuse of my good name?
No. At that point, no. It's even easier because as soon as they do it, okay, I accept that. But now, since you're telling me all this now, I haven't expressed how you all are holding it.
Mm-hmm.
You're holding it like it's yours. You just said it's mine. So you're holding my property in your trust, but I never expressed it because it happened when? When you came out kicking and fucking screaming from mom's womb.
Mm-hmm.
Did you know what was going on at that point, or were you suffering trauma of a new environment when you go all warm and cozy inside mom? Now you come out cold, kicking and screaming, and someone's slapping your ass.
Have you ever looked up the word passive misrepresentation?
No.
What you just explained is a perfect example of
passive misrepresentation is not intentional.
Yeah, let's see here.
All right, so now when they call you by that name, you have the right to express that trust.
Hold on. The definition number 2 in Black's 11th. The act of leading a person to believe something that isn't true without actually making any false statement.
Yeah, these attorneys are adept at that.
Now, what you said about the attorney and the using the trust,
mm-hmm.
I did the GSA bonds in a family court case.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd have to see this at some point.
I want to see it.
He actually filed a brief to get removed from the case and accused me of interfering with his fiduciary duty.
That's exactly what they do.
Yes. And
that's exactly what they do.
Now, here's where the hidden secret is. If you look up Rule 1.15 in the New York Code of Professional Standards or whatever it's called, it's one of the longest parts, and it's all about the property or funds of the client
mm-hmm.
and how they are to manage it.
Yes.
And when I talked to him after the case was over, and I said, "How'd you like those documents I filed?" His words, not mine. He said, "I can't discuss that with you because of attorney-client privilege." I've played that phone call with people. They said, "Wait a minute, wasn't that your attorney?" I said, "No. He was representing the estate. I was the dummy."
And when you did your GSA forms, you actually gave permission for those funds to be released.
Yep.
Or for the settlement to happen. Now he doesn't have anything to administrate, so he has to get out of the way, or else he's breach of his own fiduciary duty from refusing the settlement.
Now let me ask you this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see if you know this. I know you know a lot. Do you know how to figure the amount of the GSA bonds?
No, I've never bothered with the GSA bond stuff.
Well, you should go look up. And Eric, when I brought this to Eric's attention, or Cite Your Authority, it blew his mind. Because why did it blow his mind? He's one of the people that wrote this regulation. Let's see.
Should have paid attention to what he was writing. Huh? FAR.
Well, FAR 28.101-2. It's the Federal Acquisition Regulation. You can make the bonds $15 million apiece at 20% for a total of $3 million. That's the max amount.
Okay.
Now turn around and do your 10.
Yeah, see, and the Federal Acquisition, the FAR network lets me know that they're acquiring property interest from those estate decedents or whatever the name is, because you never surrendered it. So they have to go through all this bullshit to go, okay, we got to go collect from our property interest. So we're going to, okay, who's the contractor who's going to come forth and do this? So all these attorneys and judges, they're just contractors servicing debt obligations of the United States, because by you not surrendering that interest, you're holding the interest to be the service provider. Because that's what they did. That's what was created with the birth certificate, was a citizen of the United States. And a citizen to a country is nothing more than an account receivable or an account servicing agent to make sure its debts are paid. So if you want to use that name, you got to get rid of the one interest that's holding it all together, which is that usufruct, because you're the one who provides the energy. Thus, there's a chance all that can revert back to you when you're using it. If you're not shedding that one interest that they're running through their probate courts, and I have the IRS case called IRS versus the Estate of Field. And it's right in there. If it doesn't make, I'll read it to you, what it actually says. Let me find it here. There it is. Commissioner versus Estate of Field. It's a 1945 case. What it was is they tried to transfer something out. And here's what it says. It makes no difference how vested may be the remainder interest in the corpus, or how remote or uncertain may be the decedent's reversionary interest, if the corpus does not shed the possibility of reversion until at or after the decedent's death, the entire corpus on the date of the death is taxable. So when they run their probate court, if the reversion is still attached to the decedent's estate, they're going after the entire value of the estate. Whatever value they put up for their bond or whatever it is, right? So the one thing you have to get rid of is that reversionary interest, because that's how IRS determines whether a estate is taxable. But based on property, it gifted out. They're saying all this stuff is gifts, right? They're running it through their tax code as if you gave this to us, right? All this stuff. Well, guess what? All the stuff they get from you is a capital gains tax on them. But you're holding the reversion, which makes it what? A capital gains tax that comes back to you as the presumed executor over that estate. And I wrote this up in 2 documents called Operation of Claim in a Nutshell and Stopping the Insanity one day when I saw it, when I was just sitting there talking to my buddies, and it hit me that once they call you by that name and use that number, there is no infant decedent or anything else, but everything that they're putting on you is just a maritime lien. Well, all that's against the estate that reverts back to you. And in order to get your inheritance, you have to set up the lien interests. You always have to settle up all claims of the estate before the property is returned. All right? So when I wrote this stuff, about a month or 2 later, I'll read out a little bit of what I wrote here so y'all can get some of the... Okay. So basically what they're doing is they're just taking all the chartered vessel the name. They're putting all their debt on it, and then dumping it off into the seas and coming back for a maritime salvage operation. In the meantime, they're making an insurance claim inside that courtroom, and you're the policy they're using to make that claim, or surety. So as surety, once you perform, you have the right to go back and claim all the proceeds, because that's what a surety can do. But before that, what they're trying to do is they come in under the fiduciary obligation, right? 26 USC 6903, Form 56 type stuff. All right, it means a guardian, trustee, executor, administrator, receiver, conservator, or any person acting in fiduciary capacity for any person, including an attorney, right? That's what an attorney is. So 26 USC 1040 is the transfer of the real property. So they get you to say, what's your name, this type of stuff, right? You basically took on the role of executor to transfer real property. So you become the trustee, the executor, all that shit, right? And IRS Manual 21-7.13.3.2.2 is an infant is a decedent of a state or grantor or owner of a trust, guardianship, receiver that is yet to receive an SSN. If they're saying you have an SSN, there is no infant decedent. It may be burdened with the disabilities of infant, but you can waive that at any time. But if there's a social security number and they're saying it's yours, there is no decedent, and the infant is not the owner or truster of a trust, guardianship, receivership, or custodianship. It can't happen. So what happens is you're put in its place, and that's what they call elective, that you're the accommodation party, or an elective agreement under 26 USA 2032A 1B. You made an election when you came in and acted as if you were the accommodation party. That's the agreement. And the agreement referred to in that paragraph is a written agreement and signed by each person who has an interest, which is why they get you to sign the plea deals. Okay, that's how they're doing. You make an election to become the accommodation party as the executor. You're agreeing to this transfer. 26 USC 2001 imposes the tax on the estate, and 2002 renders the executor liable for that tax. Okay? And then I did the other one, which is stopping the insanity, is showing everybody that when they use that thing to identify you, there can't be all that stuff. There's no more presumption of abandonment, no more presumption of lost across the seas, no more presumption of death, no more presumption of anything other than the fact that you're sitting there executing this estate thing, this interest, but you never distributed the interest in that thing and that res that's held in that quote trust. That person, all this property acquired. So what happens is you become the executor. They transfer the property out from underneath you using Treasury Regulation 1.674, which is 26 USC 674. So anybody can come in and act as the grantor of that estate, as long as they don't create a taxable event back to themselves. But since you came in and volunteered to be the executor by saying that's my name, in other words, you're saying I'm the executor of that person, then you get liable for the tax. So all these people who want to be executors for this fucking thing, good luck with that. In the end, when these debts come due and everything starts getting transferred back to the Treasury, guess who's going to be held liable for that shit? The one who's claiming to be the executor. Okay, that's one reason why I don't play in that language.
Owner.
Huh? Say what?
Executor would be / owner.
The one using it at that point in time, the one who claims it's theirs.
Now, Boris, I'm partially in agreement with you, but not completely on that, because here's why. Do I have a problem if someone's going to be the executor? No. But I tell people, if you are going to play that rule, you better study those rules, because
that's right.
You will get yourself in trouble if you do not follow those rules.
Right. So what we do on every case is the first thing you do, even if you're the executor of an estate, you challenge the claim coming at the estate, right? You just don't accept it at face value, but you can only challenge it without attaching yourself to it through a jurisdictional challenge. And since all these guys' jurisdiction is limited to the property held by Congress inside one of these states, then their jurisdiction stops at that territorial border and they don't have any other claims. They're using the credit of the people within the states, so you automatically have a right of claim of write-off, set-off, whatever it is, so they can't come against you. But what they're really doing is they're coming against the decedent, which is their citizen, to say, hey, service this debt obligation and do your duty. Well, you're coming in and saying, no, wait a minute. I was given that thing. I didn't purchase it. You purchased the interest from me because you took the interest from me to create it at birth. So it's a purchase contract. They purchased your usufruct and in turn agreed to indemnify you with the certificate. The certificate is the receipt issued by the occupying army, the United States, through its host, through its municipal corporation, the state of, that accounts for a receipt for indemnification against any claims, because now that's a U.S. franchise or proprietorship. And if you, as long as you don't take over the proprietorship, 31 U.S.C. 3713B, then the claims of the United States have to be paid first, which means they have to settle that up, or else all they've done. Otherwise, the birth certificate is actually just a bill of attainder resulting in a corruption of blood, of which you're just seen as a slave who just services the debts at birth without any hope to get out of it, which is called human and child trafficking, kidnapping, man stealing, and you can start going from there with the crimes. Because now the government failed in its first duty to protect your inalienable rights and the exercise thereof, because every one of you are born free, not as slaves. The name may be a slave. The name may be what they call a slave, but the reality of it is like a master cylinder and slave cylinder in a car braking system. You push the pedal, the master cylinder has the reservoir. It sends that brake fluid down to the brakes, so it extends the pistons down to the brakes, engages the pads, and stops the vehicle. Right? That's how this is. It's you have a master, which is you, but you have a slave cylinder, which is that property interest, that name through which you do work, so you can be in the world, but not be of the world. So you can still do your duties to your Lord and Creator while assisting the host nation that granted you hospitality through one of its hospital, and gave you a receipt showing that was done. So now, under the Law of Nations, Book 2, Article 104, 105, they granted a foreigner hospitality, and you could prove that simply by asking them, "Where's my oath of office, and where in the district court did I file to become a citizen?" That eliminates your duty to that eliminates your any notion of presumption that you have allegiance to that state, or that you have an oath to it, thus a fealty to it. Now you can come back, and the other part of it is, do you reside in it? No, I'm with God. I'm in His kingdom, just operating here in the world, but not of the world. So you'd have no residence in the world. Your residence is in the kingdom. In His kingdom. You're just down here as a foreigner. Yeah.
What would it take for a person that have international status, like for instance, an immigrant, a person that have a green card holder and stuff like that?
Okay. Where'd you come from?
Jamaica.
Is it an IMF country? Does it get IMF loans from the IMF?
I never researched that because I didn't expect to research
Any country that gets IMF loans, will have the security, will have this quote Social Security and birth certificate system in operation. Because that's how these countries get the loans, is because they have all these people going, hey, yeah, we can repay this, but what they're not telling you is they're putting you into a debt slavery, which is just another position of slave, is just another servitude. But they created that person because that's a legal fiction that never attaches to anything real. So once your life and jeopardy and all your personal rights become, no, the fiction doesn't exist. Now with the green card holders, you've been granted hospitality. They granted you in, right? You can still do this because the purpose of the nation is to protect that usufruct. All you have to do now is, I think all you have to do is really, if you're going to open up the probate case, do a name change, but not to do the name change, the reorganization the way it's arranged.
Right. So I would definitely put the first name last and the last name first.
No, that doesn't mean that's not how you're doing this. You're doing it and setting up. What I mean by setting up how it's arranged is, okay, while I'm using this thing, the state who issued this birth certificate is going to be the usufructuary. The United States is going to be the United States of America is going to receive the reversion to and for the account of the United States. And then I'm going to retain the naked ownership, so I have disposal rights of everything. The clerk of the court locally is going to be the fiduciary to handle the usufructuary duties for the state they're in. And then the state attorney for that state, I mean, the attorney general for that state will be the one that represents that person from here on out to protect this union. Because the purpose of it was to create a more perfect union, and by fulfilling the more perfect union, you now get entrance into the perpetual union.
That's what I'm looking at doing. Is I'm trying to perfect my documents
and
getting ready to.
And that's how I believe. That's how I'm led to believe it should be done. And oh yeah, by the way, these two articles I want: the Operation to Claim in a Nutshell, and the Stopping the Insanity. About 2 or 3 months, I think it was, after I got a call, after I wrote these and put them out there on Jade's Creole Harmonies little talk show, and I think you only find one of the videos. I'm not sure what happened to the other ones because she broke it up into sections. I got a call from someone, and I don't know who he is. It was some guy named McBride, and he told me that I had pissed off people. A lot of people when I did this. They said that they were so pissed off, they were arranging to do a hit on me, to get rid of me, and to stop that, they put this into a court case on the international level into international human trafficking, because it totally fucking just blew open how they're doing their game.
Now, what's the name of those documents?
They're called Stopping the Insanity and Operation of Every Single Claim in a Nutshell. And you can get those through the Law Boris. You go lawboris.com and then somewhere in the, like halfway down, it's like right after the video, there's a link to the I Am Some Dude archives. And that's where these are now, because that website no longer exists.
They took that on the website.
So those two right there were.
It's not finding it on the archive.
Go to lawboris.
I did.
.com. Go down to the bottom. It says the archive works from I Am Some Dude, and you click on it. All right. Now you got to wait a little bit for it to load up, because at least with me, I did. And then in there, it's what is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. About the 10th level down, 10th line down, you'll see it. It'll be Live by the Sword, The Friendly Sovereign, Operation Nut Claim, all this stuff. Articles for inspection. So it's all the way down near the bottom. And it'll be in there about 10 rows down from the articles for inspection, little subsection there on the archives page. And that's what I mean. It was that. And then also with my court case that I had where I first started learning this, and you guys are lucky, man. You guys are lucky. You have all these people to talk to now that have come out and started talking to everybody. When we were doing this, Usufruct had 2 web pages on the whole web. One of them was Justinian, the book of Justinian, and the other one was a definition from Leck Law. Nothing else existed until I started writing about it. And then all of a sudden my writing started showing up on all these web pages. Like 18 of the top 20 searches were my works. 2 or 3 months later, all of a sudden all my shit disappeared, and the whole just cavalcade of information came flowing through like the dam broke. I mean, you should have seen how much information we had coming in the first few days that happened. It was just like incredible. It just didn't exist until that point. And then we broke it open. I went, holy fuck, look at all this stuff coming out. And that's where we've been ever since, as we've been on the Usufruct. And I needed, and I've done it in a court case, and I had them kick me out of the court and tell me I was excused. And I mean, it just blew it all up with 2 sentences that I wrote in. I didn't sign the paper. I had a notary sign it saying that I came in and told them this. And I actually had a notary who would go along with that. It was my buddy. And so we had it in there because most notaries won't let you sign, won't let you get away with signing without signing. But he said, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do it. He was getting rid of his notary anyway. He's like, I don't care. We'll go ahead and do that. So we got that done. And I've been on it ever since. And now that we have the territorial jurisdictions, I can show at the beginning, if they don't have jurisdiction, that all they did was trespass, right? But what is trespass? Isn't trespass just the exercise of someone's right to use and enjoy profits of property that doesn't belong to them? And in the corpus juris secundum, that's the very definition of usufruct, is the exercise of the right to enjoy and use and receive the profits or property that doesn't belong to them. And it's the natural result of you forgiving the trespass as your trespasses have been forgiven. But the fact that Lord maintains his vengeance means that he gets the reversion of the right they exercised. So that way you can live in peace with your brother by forgiving him, but understanding that the Lord still maintains vengeance. So now the state holds it, and as naked owner, you have the right to demand the state enforce the usufruct, or you'll do it for them under a qui tam action. Because it's a vested state interest. If nobody's going to protect it, I sure will. I'll act as the name of the state all day long, protecting that interest. But now, what I've also done is not made any matter about me. I'm irrelevant to the whole scheme of a nation. One man is one citizen or one dude is irrelevant to the scheme. But when your name now is synonymous with the United States, that dude no longer exists because now he's United States or state of Florida or whatever state he is, because now they're attacking the vested interests of the very government they're serving. So you flip it all around on them. And this is what we've been working on, and we have it now with the territorial. We have the initiation point. When they refuse, they exercise the right by issuing a ticket or arresting. So that means they're the usufruct by their own agreement, or they can agree to be trespassers. Which one do you want? You can either agree to trespass, or we can waive the trespass and you can become usufructory and we can go to peace. And that's the way everything works. Even between two men who have a contract dispute, one stole from another, well, he trespassed that man. So if that man says, okay, well, I got to forgive your trespass, so you can admit to the trespass, or you can admit to being the usufructory for making claim to property that didn't belong to you because it was in my possession and I was using it. You just came in and took it like, hey, it's an injury to that possession, because that's what trespass is. And that's how, I mean, it's really weird to talk about it, but the three interests, that's all there is. There's usufruct, naked owner, and reversion. And the usufruct has all the duties to settle the claims, pay all taxes, keep things in repair, make an inventory, and not alter the substance of the things subject to the usufruct. So while I'm usufruct of that name, they can't alter the substance, because the substance is what? For the protection and exercise of inalienable rights. And all I had to do was give up the one interest that ties me into a debt community by giving up my right to inherit the debt obligations. Because that's what the estate represents. If you're in a world of debt, the only inheritance is debt. So you shed their debt. What you're really doing with the surrender of the usufruct is giving up your right to quote, receive false profits. To enjoy false profits, give the reversion back, and now they're stuck on the hook to what? Service debt obligations, which is what they're supposed to be doing. But they're hiding behind all this shit and putting it on us because they profit from our ignorance. Yes, from us not knowing this. That's what they're profiting off of, is our ignorance.
So let me ask a way off question, like a stupid question. I've seen a few people write, because I'm not used to seeing certain documents, so I'm not really using them. Mm-hmm. What is that old harmless indemnity bond?
Okay, well, it's 40 USC 4305, and when you read it, it'll sound really screwed up when you're really looking at it. But if you take it all apart, we'll go look it up right here. 50 USC 4305 B2 or 2B. Let me make sure. Because it used to be 12 USC 95A Part 2, but now it's B2. And B2 reads, any payment, conveyance, transfer, assignment of delivery or property or interest therein, like usufructory interest, made to or for the account of the United States or otherwise as directed, pursuant to this subdivision or any rule, regulation, instruction, or direction issued hereunder, shall to the extent therefore be a full acquittance and discharge for all purposes of obligation of the person making the same. So if you hit it at the birth certificate level, then you have no obligation for the person towards anything, any interest that person acquires, because the state the United States of America automatically has the usufructuary interest and reversion. They have two interests, actually. They have all three in reversion. But the reversion doesn't take effect till death occurs of the naked owner. So, and no person shall be held liable in any court for anything for or in respect to anything done or omitted in good faith in connection with the administration of or in pursuance of and in reliance on this subdivision or any rule, regulation, instruction, or direction hereunder. Okay, so the first part of this is a contract, right? Any payment, conveyance, transfer, assignment, or delivery of property or interest therein made to or for the account of the United States or otherwise direct or pursuant to this subdivision, rule, or instruction shall to the extent be a full acquittance and discharge of the person making the same. So that's a contract. That's called a public offering. The public, the United States, offered this to say, hey, if you're in trouble with us and we're coming after you, okay, any payment, conveyance, transfer, or property or interest therein made to or for the account of the United States shall to the extent be a full acquittance and discharge. So what do you have to do? You have to perform. Contract always requires performance. So your consideration to the contract is any payment, conveyance, transfer, assignment, or delivery of property or interest therein. Their consideration is acquittance and discharge from full obligation of the person making the same. A full acquittance and discharge, not just partial, but a full. All right?
Okay.
So you perform under the contract, and now you've established a trust because now you're entitled to what? Now you're the beneficiary, while you're using that person, of a full acquittance and discharge of all purposes, the obligation of the person making the same. So while you're using the person, that name everybody uses, every debt obligation that person comes across as full acquittance and discharge for all purposes of the obligation, because the interest the person gave over is of the person, not of any just transaction that person gave in. The person itself made him subjugated himself to that, quote, personal servitude of usufruct, but he retains naked ownership. So while you're using it, naked ownership is you have the right of disposal, the right to alienate, the right to destroy. You can, anything you get, you can do anything you want with it. They can't stop you, but they just get the profit from it. So the profit from using a car is what? It's not the car. It's the using of the car, the gas you use, the parts you consume, the tires you use, all that shit you do with it generates commerce. The car just sitting there does nothing for commerce. The person just sitting there is just a piece of paper. The property means nothing to them. The commerce generated by using the property is what means something to them.
It's basically a duty. That's why they use the I would say, like, even with child support, with me not doing nothing for the kid, and they coming at me for the kid, me being paying out money for the kids, that's me doing something at the same time. They take an interest,
and that's
out
done
of
under
it
that's done under a federal contract.
Right.
Okay, all child support are federal contracts. So all these guys running around here are federal contractors. They're actually acting outside of their jurisdiction, but to go to peace with them, you can surrender your interest, your usufructuary interest in the person they're going after because they're profiting from it. They're the ones profiting from the child support because the monies they collect are not going to go to the child and the mother. That's not the intent of the legislation. There was no right created to them for that. I've got the court cases that say that. No right was created for the mother or the child or the parent holding the child and doing this, right? The only ones that are profiting are child protection services and all those people. So what do? When you refuse to give over the interest, they take the interest, which is represented by your usufructuary interest in your child. Because in a mother and a father can only have as most in their offspring is a usufructuary interest in that offspring. You're not allowed to harm that thing. You can't go out and destroy it. That's why abortion is so fucking wrong. It violates the laws of usufruct in nature, because that being that's created when the mother and father have sex has a spark that's added to it by God. That's no longer the woman's body now. The woman's body is just a vessel by which another body is being created, being established until it comes forth. That's the purpose of a woman's womb. And the placenta, what everybody thinks is this thing they're taking, is actually an injury done to the child, not to the mother. The placenta was supposed to remain with the baby born until it falls off to finish the transfer of the nutrients, and then it falls off. It wasn't supposed to be taken off. It wasn't supposed to be cut off. It wasn't supposed to be none of that shit. It was supposed to naturally fall off. Same thing happens in the animal world. The mother. I don't know if you ever watch cats give birth, but the cats are born in the sheathing, and the mother eats the sheathing because it regenerates her, and then she sits down and licks the placenta and everything else that comes out. Then she sometimes eats that too. That's to regenerate her and provide the nutrients for the milking process. But no way were you supposed to go in there and cut that thing off. That's not your duty. That's the cat has its natural instructions, nature takes over, and everything happens. So something artificial, a juridical person has been created, something an operation of law. But for anybody to say that they put hexes and spells on that and that's all bullshit. That's all superstitious bullshit people believe.
Yeah, some evil stuff.
Right?
I mean, people do that in the past, but not for the government purpose. It's not for the government purpose. I'm not saying that people don't do it, because people do it. That's why they mention it. But not for the government purpose. That was the purpose.
So when you have this stuff, and then when no person shall be held liable in court for anything respected, done, or remission in good faith with connection with, that's the insurance policy. That's the indemnification of all parties while administrating this person under this will and intent. And that's what creates the treaty. So when you're going into your probate thing, I still think the probate shouldn't be done to change the name at all, but to reorganize the debtor under a bankruptcy action so that he is discharged from any further obligations in servicing the bankruptcy. Right. And that represents your blood with Christ, because now what are you doing? You're injecting Christ into the matter and turning this person, now that everybody hates, into its fully operation of as if it were Christ in the world, because you have to remit your sins unto Christ. Christ gets them absoluted from the Father, right? Christ doesn't forgive sin, the Father does. Christ just accepts your sins for the payment the Father has already put in him. So same thing with this person. This person is just a sinner. It's a second thief on the cross right now until he accepts the offer of Christ. In order to accept the offer of Christ, you have to put all your debts onto him, all your sins, and then he gets them absolved from the Father by the blood of Christ. The person operates under the same fundamental principles. The person becomes Christ, gets absolved from the Father, the Lord, the state, of the sins that were remitted unto it that go to that are property of the state now. Because Christ holds all rights, titles, and interests to all your sins. Therefore, the Father holds all rights and titles to your sins. Christ is just the insurance policy put in place so you don't have to, you don't have to go through the old so God doesn't get all Old Testament on everybody anymore. Fire and brimstone falling from the sky and all that shit. It ain't going to happen no more. But that's what's been put in place, because these guys, they're just Jesuits. They're just minions. They're what? They're the followers of Satan, right? But Satan's blueprint for a government comes from where? What's the only blueprint Satan has for a governmental apparatus? God's government. So his people have been putting God's government into place, and everybody has been fighting it thinking they have to separate themselves from it. And that's the greatest psyop these people played, is putting God's government in place and getting his people to fight it. By not following the commandments and the laws and the rules and the guidance of the that was provided with the Bible.
So what I'm getting from you is that instead of fight it, we should find ourselves indemnified from it.
Yes. And the way you do that is you have to get rid of the reversion, but in order for that interest to show up, you have to show where it exists. That's why you do a territorial jurisdiction challenge, to show that they're operating out of their jurisdiction. Thus, any claim they made is they exercise the right to profits and property and interest that that belongs to another, that they don't have right to. But they exercise the right, and in their world, that's defined as usufruct. And once you surrender the usufruct, it only lasts for 99 years. So it inherently contains what? A natural reversionary interest after that period that goes back to the estate from which it arose. Well, the IRS says, well, there's a possibility of reversion of something, so that's taxable. So you shed the reversion to the storehouse to give all glory back to God, because that's what we stole in the garden when we ate from the apple. We decided we were going to know good and evil, thus took away the glory we were going to do from God and became judgmental of everything. So we started judging everything. So we have been judged this whole time. So to get rid of that curse, you got to get rid of the reversion, which is where all the glory or that right to judge comes back to you. You just do the works; they go to the Lord. But you doing the work, the physical, emotional, all that labor you're doing, still means that something can come back to you by natural operation of law. So you get rid of that reversion, that creates the naked ownership. So you have the Father, the usufruct, the Son, the reversion, the Holy Spirit, the naked ownership. That's what resides in you, is the Holy Spirit. And that's what you're doing. You're shedding it all to release the Holy Spirit in you. Now you stand naked before God again, and the state has to take care of all its interests. So if you're ever in like those child support things, first do the territorial jurisdiction challenge, show them where state and all that only operates in their states. So therefore now they're making claims to property that doesn't belong to them, and that's a right they can exercise, but that right is called usufruct, where they inherit liabilities along with the right to profit. So all these guys trying to profit will now have to settle up the claims for the child support to take care of the baby that your mother's bitching about that you're not doing. And we had a guy, and I know Elvick did this in jail with someone. He was in jail, and the guy gets a tax bill for $63,000, I think the amount was. And he had a child support problem. And Elvick's like, all right, now take that bill and accept it for value, and tell him to apply it to the balance of the child support. So he did that, and about a month goes by, and he gets a letter from his baby mama with pictures of the children saying, thank you for keeping everything. Now, here's your children's pictures, and thank you for making all the payments good and everything else. And he gets another bill from the IRS. This bill was less the amount of the child support that was in arrears that he got back. It was like, I think it was like $48,000 or $58,000 or something he got back. And Elvick told him, now you better go take that money, that debt, and go put a down payment on a house with it, or else they're going to come back and try and collect it. Because debt is an asset in a debt-based world. Once you accept a debt, you can tender it to pay for the debt. It's currency in a debt-based world. Any debt you accept becomes a very payment for the debt they're trying to collect in a debt-based world. And everything is debt-based. So once you accept a debt, you can use it to pay for that same debt. And when they refuse to do it, well, they just dishonored their own instrument. And they sent it through the mails, Now it's a scheme to defraud using the mails and wires of the United States.
They just reject their own instrument. That was some key stuff that you just.
Yeah, it's all instruments.
And I once had an issue where I read a bank some of the bank laws in the bank books, and then I read the contract that I have with a bank, And then I wrote out a check because they gave me a check, which is their instrument, and I wrote it out to myself, which I already heard that it was wrong. But I wrote it out to myself, and I wrote the amount on it. And then in their own bank books, laws, whatever they have, said that it's not required to write the amount in words. And in the book it said this is legal tender. And also they said they have the right to deposit any deposit payable to me. They have the right to deposit. So I was like, okay, let me take it to the bank. So when I take it to the bank, they're like, okay, I'm not sure you can do that. I said, why would I not be able to do that? Because look, this is your instrument. It said any amount payable to me, it's payable to me. I'm giving it to you, and you consider this as legal tender. So what do you mean? They said, I'm not sure you can do that. I'm guessing because you didn't write the words in, because by law we're supposed to write the words in. But also your book said not required by law to write it in. So I'm confused here. What I'm supposed to do with this instrument? And I was like, okay. Today, what's his name? Pastor, kind of cleared it up to me, saying that I can't do that. But I'm still in doubt of that because of what you just said. Because you see, why are you refusing your own instrument?
Right.
Now the reason why I said you can't make it out payable to you is, what is that trust account? You can't use it like a checking account. You can only use it to settle debt. Okay.
Right. There has to be a debt present.
You have to create the public debt first, and then let them settle it with the trust.
Yes. And
when you are saying pay to you, you're using it like a checking account.
Right. And I've done.
That's exactly what I was using. That's exactly what I was giving it to.
Right. But you're not setting it. You're not setting off a debt that was created that was created.
Yeah, I have a debt already. It was for the same amount. I had a debt, but it was for the same amount, but it wasn't into that bank that I was putting the money into.
You could take that check and go to another bank and deposit it give it over to the party who was making the debt claim. Now we used to do this. So I did this on an account close check. I'm going to tell you this. This is great. I did it on a seatbelt violation, and I did one else for a Bank of America credit card. And the Bank of America guy, he called me up, the attorney, and he goes, "Yeah, we got this checker. We just want to know what to do with it." And and at the time, I was like, "I don't know, take it to the IRS." I go, make the claim with them for it. And he just said, "I don't want to fucking go to the IRS," and hung up the phone. And I never heard from him again. The second time I did one was a seatbelt violation. And there was 3 times. That was also with the court case I had, and they gave it back and had 2 hole punches up at the top, which is exactly how they should have done when they process it right. But this is back when FedWire was also open, so I don't know if this will all work now. But we did an account close check using FedWire and gave it into the seatbelt for the seatbelt violation. Well, they came out and sent 2 big dudes to come pick me up, and I spent 10 days in jail before they kicked me out after I got the judge to say shit on the bench. But so we're sitting there, and yeah, because I went and they had me in there in the public, and the public defender was speaking. I was arm barred him over, and I go, "Hey, what's your name?" And she gave me her name. I go, "Do you have a claim against me?" She goes, "No." "Do you know anybody who has a claim?" She says, "The state of Florida has a claim against you." Immediately went shit, and I mean it was verbal and everything. Everybody heard it. And the bailiff jumped up and said, "You either sit down before I throw you down." And I'm like, "What the hell did I just do?" And they kicked me. I mean, they literally kicked me out of jail. I mean, then like 3 days later, they had a hearing, and they kicked me out of jail so quickly that they were calling my name by the time I got back from the court. By the time I got back to the quad, they were calling my name for 15 minutes. So like, "Where you been?" They'd be calling my name for 15 minutes. Like, I just got back. But that same ticket they brought up in another case, and I'm sitting there talking with the public defender they had assigned to that one. And he goes, "Well, they just want their money." And I looked at him, I go, "Why they deposit in their general operating fund instead of with the treasury like they're supposed to?" Because that's exactly where that check should have gone. It's a treasury, not into their general operating fund at a bank. It should have been given over to the treasury through FedWire. That was the instructions on the check. So he goes, "You bank with the treasury?" I go, "Don't we all?" And I never heard from him again. And they used that as the basis for incompetency plea on the other one. It was hilarious. But when a check comes back account closed, at least when it was done through the Fedwire, it should have 2 hole punches up where the check number is. You know, that little number at the right corner. It'll have 2 hole punches in there, and that's exactly what happened with one of my checks. That's the one I gave to the bank. That was the one that they said I defrauded, or the people I defrauded, part of them, and they can never prove it. I asked them for proof of claim, they never answered it. So everything y'all are getting are what I learned from those court cases, that 9-year period of court case time, where it sucked because you can't do anything when court case is going on. So, but I was out on bond from that case, got arrested 4 times, and nobody ever brought it up. Nobody brought up the bond on that case. Nobody brought it up. Nobody said nothing. And I was just like, wow, what's this? Everybody else usually gets a violation of bonds and gets everything revoked. But what's this? It's just sitting there in the background, and nobody's saying nothing about it. Nobody said nothing about it.
It was so funny that you mentioned that they want to put it in a plea for you, and I just watch it. Isn't that illegal?
Well, they're not putting the plea for you. They're putting the plea for the person, so they can justify their administration.
Hold on. Now, here's something to think about. Now, Boris, I shared the link up above. Yes, ma'am. What is it? Sweet tea. Check this out, Boris.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the list of trustees.
Okay.
Now, when they go try to put a plea in for you, my personal opinion, you should pop right back up and say, "Hold up, Your Honor, are you the trustee for the trust?" Because why? Only the trustees have the decision-making power.
Yeah.
The beneficiaries don't. Now.
Well, actually, now, until you divest yourself of the interest, who's the beneficiary?
You're not. The state is.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
So when the state, so therefore, when you're coming in, what are you? Until you divest yourself of the interest and establish why that trust is being formed or what you're doing with it, aren't you just a person intermeddling with the infant estate?
Mm-hmm. That's where you got the trustee de Santor.
Yeah. So that's what you are at that point. That's why we do this expression of trust, and we get rid of the interest. So we challenge them on their jurisdictional authority. And the reason we do that is you protect the Treasury from being robbed, because they're falsifying all their claims by going outside their jurisdictions. So if they're outside of their jurisdiction, it just became personal on them. Now they're personally liable for everything because now they are the ones intermeddling with an infant estate without authority.
And that's, this is why when the judge asks, how do you plead? Well, you're not the trustee. When you go and plead, you're now making decisions for the trust that you don't have the authority to make.
And you became de facto trustee.
That's why they charge you under trustee de Santor.
Yeah. In Florida, it's called the de facto trustee doctrine. You walk like a duck, you talk like a duck, you acted like a duck, you must be a duck even if you're not.
Yep. And now you have the liability.
Yep. And that's how they do it. What's your name? Well, gee, Judge, I believe that's the name I use is or you can I actually think the best way, I'm beginning to look at this more and more. I think the best way to respond to that question is what is in a name. If a rose was called by any other name, wouldn't it smell just as sweet?
Well, you know Popeye, don't you?
Yeah, I am's what I am.
Yeah, he said, no, not the character Popeye.
Oh.
The guy Popeye out in California. You remember we was doing that roundtable discussion a while back? And what did Popeye say? He goes, of course, so I've been known to use that name.
Yeah.
And
we've done that before, and the guys down here in Florida get fucking pissed. Pissed. They're like, well, if you're not that person, then why are you? And then I can't hear you, and we're just going to put a warrant out, blah blah blah. And at that next one, to go, well, since you're saying I'm not the person, since we're all in agreement, I'm not the person. I trust that your decision here today will not cause me harm.
Mhm.
And that's how
Or
you would diffuse the whole. That's how you would diffuse the whole putting out warrants and stuff. Well, since we're all in agreement, I'm not the person here today. Then I trust your decision will not cause me harm when they execute it.
or add to that will not cause me harm or place me in an undue burden.
Yeah,
Because they can't place you in an undue burden. They can
and
only
they
place a
can't
burden on
force you to claim to be, and they can't force you to claim to be that man, that person, because 18 USC 911 makes it a felony to claim to be a U.S. citizen if you're not. And the use of the social turns you into a public official, which means if you're claiming that you're also falsifying that you're a public official under USC 1912. So you're creating two crimes right there: falsifying that you're a U.S. citizen and impersonating a public official.
Mm-hmm.
And once you've done that, you've done an act of idolatry, and they don't give a shit no more, because now you just sinned, and they're going to liquidate the sin, because that's what this nation was designed to do, is liquidate sin.
If anybody don't think that, they need to just go back through the statutes at large from the very first Congress.
You don't even need to do that. We got a picture that's taken out of a Jesuit magazine where it says exactly that.
Well, the reason why I was bringing that up is there were laws passed giving land to a certain organization to go carry the gospel to the heathens.
Yeah. But when you look at it, here it is right here. Okay, we found this off of a book, Rulers of Evil. I think Topper Saucy wrote that one.
Mm-hmm. But
inside of it, he has a quote from a political scientist, Michael Novak, a Jesuit political scientist. January 8th, 1989, the issue of America, the weekly magazine of American Jesuits. The framers wanted to build a novus order, a new world order, that would secure liberty and justice for all. The underlying principle of this new order is the fact of human sin. To build a republic designed for sinners, then, is an indispensable task. There's no use building a social system for saints. There are too few of them, and those there are impossible to live with. Any effective social system, therefore, must therefore be designed for the only moral majority there is, sinners.
Now, doesn't that say in Romans?
Because if you're a saint, you don't need government. You govern yourself, and you live according to God's law all the time.
Now, doesn't it say in Romans that government was instituted by God to do what? Punish the wicked?
Yep.
We never look in the mirror and figure out that that's us.
Yeah. And Satan and his minions are down here because of Deuteronomy. They were put down to earth to what? Receive the nations and her people? To do what? What was Satan supposed to do? Show them a world without God in it so the people will be turned back to God. That's their duty.
And what did Satan do instead? Get the people to not believe in Satan.
Yeah, so unless they turn their back on God. Because if they don't believe in Satan, they'll never believe in God. Mm-hmm. Because without God, without Satan, God doesn't exist. So if he gets them to deny Satan, he denies God.
And when they deny
Satan's real
because they deny good.
Yeah, Satan is real. Actually, they deny life. Because the opposite of evil is not good. The opposite of evil is life. Because the tree of good and evil versus the tree of life.
Mm-hmm. Good point.
So so the opposite of evil is live, like the opposite of war is raw, because war is an excited state that must be acted upon by an outside force. Raw is just a natural state when everything's at rest.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at, so it's not good and evil that you care about. It's good and evil versus life. So if you want good and evil, awesome, you're dead to the Lord, which is why they treat you as a dead dude in the courts. You don't want life. You don't want life. You don't want an everlasting life. You want to know good and evil. You don't want life. You want good and evil, which means you're dead to the Lord. Because what did he say? If you're dead, when he took from the apple, he basically kicked Adam and Eve out and said, "You're dead to me now, and I'm going to put cherubs up here. If you come back, they're going to fuck you up." Mm-hmm.
This
Hold
is
on a
why I
second.
said earlier, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. This whole system revolves, whether you believe in that religion or not, it's really not the point. Do you believe the principles that are laid out? Because you'll never understand this system of government without understanding the principles in that book. This is the thing people don't realize. There has never been a form of government created in the form we have based from any other religion. Go look at Islam.
All right. Now here's
Different
another
type
thing
of
that's going to
government.
blow. Here's another thing. Nobody living today has ever seen this government. It existed for exactly a moment in time until George Washington got control of it and did the Whiskey Rebellion. We've been under a martial law ever since.
Mm-hmm.
You've never seen the Republic. Nobody has. It's been built, it's been constructed, but like the Fifth Element scene where they're making Lilu again, and they found the one cell and they're reconstructing her, the bones, the skins, the tissues, the nerves, everything's been put in place. They had to cover it up and let it be bombarded by what? By all that ultraviolet radiation, which is what you see going on here, so the nation could build skin to defend itself. And you're about to see the unveiling of a nation nobody has ever seen. And it's only activated through love thy neighbor. That would be also be useful.
Well, let me ask you this. I wanted to ask you this earlier and I couldn't. When
Uh-huh.
you was going through Article 4 of the, not the Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, you
Mhm.
said no one lives in the Republic.
No.
I don't have evidence of this. It was something that just made sense to me. Somebody was telling me, says they didn't know this for sure. They had a suspicion this was the case. If you go back through the vote, how the voting system is supposed to work, in other words, the people voting today have really no say-so. They are just
Right.
giving a suggestion. Who has the say-so? The
The
electorate.
the electorate.
Now, and she said she knows someone, Dee was telling me, she said, I know someone that's actually one of the electorate, the state electorates. And she says, I've always wondered, are they actually citizens of the states under the Republic and not under the
No.
United
I'm
States?
going to say no because Florida makes a provision to have electors and stuff like that in their constitution. And all these current constitutions you have are nothing but armistice agreements.
They're
We're in all
under the
U.S.
federal. Yeah,
Yeah,
they're under the
they're all
federal.
federal constitutions. They're all put in place by municipalities created by the United States under the Articles of Confederation because there was no adequate protection for person or property in the states at the end of the Civil War. So they put these things in these military governments. So you have two forms of government. You have a civil and a military authority. Both of them exist. But when the
Mhm.
people come back and reform their states, both of those disappear.
Hmm.
Both of them disappear.
The civil
Because the
and
people,
the
the civil and the military that was put in place, the civil that was existing before the act, which is the Northwest Ordinance, and then the military one that's created as a result of the act. They'll both disappear because the Northwest Ordinance is only to cover territory of the United States, not the states. Once a state is created from the territories of the United States, it automatically becomes part of the Articles and is on the same level as them. May not be part of the original 13 nations, but it's part of the Articles.
yeah.
And that's written. But Article 4 of the Confederation, I think it's Article 4. Let me pull them up here. That when the states went to war, it automatically kicked in the whole. Let's see. I'm going to show you here that the states automatically took over the government. I mean, the military.
Yeah.
Okay. No state shall engage any war without the consent of the United States and Congress assembled unless such state be actually invaded by enemies or shall have received certain advice of resolution being formed by some nation of Indians to invade such state. And the danger is so imminent to admit delay until the United States Congress can be assembled. And then it comes down, where was it say military? I know it's in there. I saw it. but they're not allowed to go to war. Damn it. It automatically kicks it in when or was it in the north? I don't know. One of these, it kicks it in right when the union's in danger from invasion within or without, and they go to war. It automatically puts it under the jurisdiction of the military. Maybe it's Article 9. One of the articles in here. I know it's in there. I've read it.
Now here's something that goes right along with what you're saying, and this is just a legal theory, but it's based on the evidence. Go back to the Civil War.
Yeah.
The governor of North Carolina wrote a letter of surrender to Lincoln. Now, under the laws of nations, doesn't that make North Carolina a federal territory? Because now that nation was conquered by Lincoln under his war powers?
All right. They didn't conquer those states because they never expressly committed a treaty, right? They would have, if it was a nation, they wouldn't have just done Appomattox and signed an armistice agreement. They would have actually had to come to a treaty. So the armistice agreement still means, what's that?
So you're saying the actual surrender that the governor of North Carolina did during the Civil War wasn't a surrender, it was an armistice.
It's an armistice.
Okay.
Because the United States is not a nation. The United States of America is a conglomeration of nations.
Okay, I can
The
agree
United
with that.
States is not a nation. It's not a nationality. There's no such thing as United States nationality or a nationality of the United States. You have Floridian, Oregonian, Texian, Illini, Michigander, Mainer,
Yeah, those are
Bostonian.
The nations.
Those are the nations. That's within the government printing office to show you the natives of the states. That's how they're called. So you're not a U.S. citizen. I'm a Floridian. Floridian's not a U.S. citizen because it's a native of the state. Therefore, it wasn't born in the United States. It was born on the land of Florida, which is where you were born. And I remember seeing this in a video one time on YouTube a long time ago. They were doing homeland checkpoints, like on some street somewhere, like somewhere down, I forget where it was, somewhere down in the border region. And this dude comes up on it. And he asked, and the officer goes, "Are you a U.S. citizen?" He's like, "No, I was born in a hospital." And he just got waved through. U.S. citizens are not born in hospitals. U.S. citizens are born by lawyers on paper, filed as corporations.
Wow, that's a freaking cool video.
And I got another one that someone sent over recently that shows a guy talking in Supreme Court, talking jurisdiction, and he's using the international shoe case.
Oh.
All right. The international shoe case is the de facto determination of how they determine jurisdiction on stuff. And that's where the minimum contacts and everything else come in. But you should listen. I'll put it in the group. And you should listen to this. Some interesting shit this guy is talking about when you go into another, like when a nation wants to enter a trade into a trade zone, like wants to do trade in a business that the United States basically has a monopoly on. They allow them in there, but that business has to give up certain rights. And the question before the court by the court to this guy was, do you think it's fair that they have to give up all their rights just to do business? And I listen to some of these people, like as soon as you do business with them, you give up all your rights. It's like, no, you don't. As soon as you do business, you give up all your rights. You really don't. You just don't have sovereignty with respect to the one you're dealing with.
Yes, you give
because there's no sovereignty in commerce. But just because you're doing business with someone doesn't mean all your rights are gone.
You waive certain rights.
You're only for that purpose of that transaction.
But you keep certain rights as long as you express them right.
Correct. But in commerce, there's no such thing as sovereignty.
True. It's all about contracts and what rights are expressed in the contract. Well, the people never express it.
Yes, they just accept the default terms.
Now,
and also when you're looking at how can YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and all these people do what they're doing to people when they kick them off? Is it a First Amendment breach?
No.
It's according to their terms and conditions.
That's right.
They're using terms and conditions to govern how these things are operating, and people are going to the government say you got to govern. No, they're using their terms and conditions of how you're going to use that intellectual property, and if you have a problem with it, you go into arbitration.
Yep.
You don't make claims in federal court because that's not the venue they chose for arbitration. Most of these guys' arbitration is in San Francisco because the Ninth Circuit Court, the one that controls California region, is very, very amenable to arbitration.
Mm-hmm.
So they go there, and that's how you're supposed to settle your disputes with all these tech companies. Not going to court. Court doesn't have jurisdiction because it's intellectual property and it's a contract between two people. Court doesn't have that. That court is a territorial court for settling territorial disputes regarding properties of Congress.
I like the way Eric put it the other day. He says he doesn't necessarily use the nationality. He says, I have an interest in North Carolina. Because what is protected? What is not taxable? What are they taxing?
The interests of the United States are never protected, are never taxed.
Okay. That's well, not only that. Well, I've got a document that my dad got because he was having a dispute with the North Carolina Revenue Office, and on the document, they admit they're taxing rights and interest
in property.
Yes. So if you have an interest in that state, what's your interest?
Exactly. And if you set it up to your interest as what? To fulfill the purpose of government, they can't tax it.
Uh-huh.
And the purpose of government is what? Not to control your mind like everybody thinks it is. The purpose of government is to protect and defend inalienable rights and the exercise thereof. If it's not doing that, it failed in its purpose and must be reorganized.
And that's where you've heard that term about, what's that term? I can't remember what it was. That some government, it's not defunct, it's not, what is it? It's not called a valid government. It's some other political term. Like Germany, when it started. No, not de facto or de jure, but it's something along the lines of a failed government. But that's not the term. I can't remember it. When it's no longer doing what it's supposed to do, it is no longer a valid government. But I can't remember the actual political term.
Yeah. All right, guys, I have to take off here, so I just want to jump on and say hello. I saw you're having a chat.
I'm glad. I like it when you come on. You always bring a lot of good stuff to the table.
Yeah, so that's what we're doing with it, because I don't care about settling bills and stuff. I want my country. I want my nation to where it respects rights of the people.
Well, I'm going to tell you what I'm working on, Boris. I'm actually working on, what's it called, going to the probate court.
Yeah.
So if you've got any documentation you would like to share with me to help me perfect my filing.
Now, I did do a challenge of nonage, to remove the nonage. That's what they call it here in Florida, is nonage.
Uh-huh.
And I sent it up to I sent it to the court over here and the Supreme Court. Never heard anything about it. And then one time I contacted the court on behalf of a buddy, the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm.
They wrote back and put information regarding that nonage on the letter. So they've officially recognized my ministry.
Nice.
It's been officially recognized by the Supreme Court. I just don't know how to get these lower courts to recognize, because I don't have an order from the Supreme Court saying, hey, we recognize it. I just have a letter from them showing that they put my minister title on it.
Well, you got my number.
Yeah.
You got my number. Give me a call later. I got something I'll send you that somebody shared with me.
Yeah,
it might help you because
you kind of have to get something from them to show to their underlings that, hey, okay, this is good, go do it, because that's all they listen to. That's their God. The courts are their God.
Yes.
That's the
Well,
voice of God to them.
I've got an address you might be interested in, and it's not
Yeah.
one you can find publicly. And it will be something that you could probably use to get that recognition. I won't put it
Okay.
out publicly because why?
We'll see, because we've
Public
got.
tends to start
Yeah.
throwing everything at it, and then it screws everything
Oh,
up.
I know. And I have a hard time with keeping people focused on. They want to throw the kitchen sink at every single paperwork they do. I was like, no. Look at what you're doing and go for the objective, not for everything else you think should be in there because you want them to know about it. And you think by naming names or doing all this stuff or mailing out to 50 people, it's going to make a difference. And it doesn't. Deal with the parties you're dealing with. Deal with the issue you're dealing with, and don't look at everything on the sides of it, because that's the red herring distractions that are going to get you into argument and undo what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's the advice I have to people is look at what you're doing, look at what they're bound to do, and then perform and then what they're bound to do, that's the questions you ask, what they're bound to produce and everything else. So you don't ask them stupid questions like all this other stuff people are asking, but it's like with these laws. Okay, with the vet, I had to see they had to have two options in place. They had to show he was a danger, and he had to be incompetent. Once he wasn't either one of those, they had no claim. I don't care what else they did. Same thing with these driver's license issues. Once they can't define state, everything else is out of their jurisdiction. Anything they did now is a crime because they left their jurisdiction, of which each member and participant is now personally liable for. And they waived their sovereign immunities because now they acted in what? A commercial capacity, because they left their government and went to the only other form of government, which is proprietary. So you have government and proprietary. Proprietary is where the immunities don't exist.
Yeah.
Because that's all business. But anyhow, I got to go. Got to get out of here.
Yeah. Call me later, and I'll get that information.
Thanks for having me on and listening, and I'll talk to y'all later.
Talk to you later.
Can I submit the form to you? And you take a look at it. And
just let's see. Where's my actual private channel here, so people can submit, so it doesn't get public. I don't even know my own Telegram name. I think it's some dude. No, that's the account there. I think it's just some dude.
Yeah. I'll get it. I'm in it. I'll get it for him.
Okay, good.
All right, I'm about to send it to you, and next time when you come on, you can talk to me about it.
Okay. All right, but I got to get going, guys. Appreciate it. I'll talk to y'all later.
Okay.
All right, thanks.
Well, y'all, I'm going to jump off of here.